Hello and welcome to our class in rhetorical theory. I'm Dr. Jerome Mahaffey. You can call me Jerome, Dr. Jerome, Dr. Mahaffey, Dr. J, take your pick. I'm just not that formal of a person, and we'll just move on from there. I won't talk about some of my very formal colleagues and all of that. Rhetorical theory. Welcome to class. And maybe you know what rhetorical theory is about and you're here to learn a little bit more. I think we can provide that. Or you have no clue what this is about. It sounded interesting. You've heard the term rhetoric. What does the term rhetoric mean? Rhetoric, something you don't want to step in when you're out in the field, on a pasture. You know, that's the common definition of rhetoric for a lot of people. Oh, don't give me your rhetoric. And it's well deserved, I'll say. But that's not all rhetoric is. And if that's what you have felt it is for much of your life, I'm glad you're in this class because I'm hoping that we can get past that, move beyond it, and recognize that rhetoric is much more than you can imagine. I have a PhD in rhetoric. My mentor was one of the most respected faculty in the world in the field of rhetoric. Right there in that top group of faculty that are all best friends and debate rhetoric theory and are setting the course for classes like public speaking even. So I got a pretty good education in rhetoric. I won't bore you with my life story of kind of being a young criminal and becoming a Christian at about age 15, and which literally saved me from probably a career in crime that would have ended in jail at some point. And at one point I thought it was going to, one specific day, but we don't need to tell you about that story. Eventually, I worked in construction for 15 years before I went to college. And things have worked out pretty well. Some of you have returned to school. You're in an online class here, and you've been out of school a long time. That's okay. There's still a lot of life ahead of you, and going to college is probably worth your time. You'll at least be educated. You won't be so naive about how the world operates. Courses like this, I'm hoping, will really help achieve that goal. And I graduated from Arizona State University after 15 years in the electrical trade and doing odd jobs while in college with a degree in communication. And my professor, Dr. Leslie DeMar at Arizona State University West, called me at home and said, "I need to talk to you." I was going to graduate in 2 days, and I'm thinking, oh no, she's the chair of the department. I just took a class from her. Oh no, I'm not going to graduate. And so I went to her office and walked in, and she turned on some soft music and said, "Isn't this really nice? I just found this DVD, or this CD. And then she pulled my paper off her desk that I wrote for the term paper for her class. And she said, "You really need to go to graduate school." And then she started, talking about my paper and what I did well in there. And what she was telling me that I wasn't quite able to put into words at the time is that I had an aptitude for this subject that the other students didn't have. And I took her advice. I applied to graduate school. She gave me some suggestions. I got accepted at Syracuse University. And so we packed up our family and our belongings and got a van with a trailer, and we drove to Syracuse, New York from Phoenix, Arizona, and I went to college there for 2 years and earned a master's degree, and went there studying intercultural communication, but I took a rhetoric course there, and with each rhetoric class I took, I understood it better and better, and at that time still didn't quite realize that I had an aptitude for this that I didn't understand. And my thesis advisor there at Syracuse, Dr. John Adams, advised me to why not become a teacher? why not teach rhetoric? And you can go to get a PhD in rhetoric from, and he gave me some advice on where to apply, and I applied at those places. I was accepted, I think, 4 out of 5 colleges. Prior to that, I was only accepted at 1 out of 5. Interesting. You know, starting college late, I was slow on a few things that some of you online students may be feeling. You'll get past it, don't worry. And I was accepted at several colleges. 3 of them offered a full ride scholarship, assistantship, and I had a hard decision to make, and I chose the University of Memphis and went there to study with Dr. John Campbell. And I believe I got probably as good of an education in this field as you could get. Some of my colleagues clearly are probably better at rhetoric, understand it more fully than I do, but I really enjoy conferences and talking to them and talking to colleagues about it, and I'm happy with where I'm at. So here we are in a class in rhetorical theory, rhetoric, the art of persuasion. How's that for the quick definition? But as I said, it's much more than that, and we want to learn how much more than that is. It is in this class. And all the places that we find rhetoric, literally leaving no stone unturned, we find it just about in every discipline, in every field. Even in the sciences, we find scientists using rhetoric. Not the bullshit type, but a genuine type. But rhetoric nonetheless, and the better scientists understand rhetorical principles. Scientists like, you know, Bill Nye. Oh, he's really good with rhetoric. What's his name? Richard Dawkins. Yeah, the evolution apostle. He's really good at rhetoric. And frankly, the presentations of both of those people have a little bit of science and a lot more fair and unfair argumentation about their topics. And that's where we start defining rhetoric a little more broadly. Yes, it's good, solid argumentation that will persuade people of the truth, but it can also be the type of argumentation that cheats a little bit, maybe cheats a lot. You know, people that are in sales, unfortunately, learn these tactics, that influences people, that manipulates emotions. I call it the dark side of rhetoric. And rather than persuading people to do what's in their own best interest as well as your shared best interests together, too many people use the art of rhetoric to manipulate and persuade others to do things that they may not have done without that influence. Maybe that's it, rhetoric, the art of influence. You know, holding a gun to somebody's head and saying, do this or tell us everything. It's very persuasive, but that's not rhetoric. Rhetoric is not coercion. So don't let anybody or any writer on rhetoric tell you that coercion, torture, is the same as persuasion. It's not. With persuasion, we get people to willingly do what they're going to be doing, whether we manipulated them to do what we want or we gave them information and maybe gave them some arguments to steer them one direction or another or away from something. That's the true art of rhetoric. It is an art of power, as we'll learn in our first reading. Science is an art or a technique is a Greek word, of coming to understand truth, science and truth, and they use the field of dialectic, these IC words. The arts, beauty, aesthetics are all connected, and we'll read about that. Rhetoric is power. Politics is its field, and it's about power rather than truth or beauty. Okay, so that's a little bit about the definition. I've told you a bit about myself. Here in this class, we will have some various assignments. I want you to think more than get stressed over assignments. And so the kind of assignments we'll be doing are, well, number one, of course, exams. Yes, and these will be vocabulary exams. If you don't know the vocabulary of a discipline, you do not understand that discipline. And you'll be learning words like enthymeme, and syllogism, and dialectic, Maybe you know those terms. If you had an argumentation class, you do. If you've had public speaking, you probably are familiar with them. But we'll go beyond that. We'll learn words like in utremque partem. It's a Greek term. Or the Italian term, or the Latin literaturiazione. That's a nice word to spring on your friends. And we need to learn what those words are about to fully understand rhetoric. And we have a whole vocabulary of them that we will be exploring and expanding, and we'll learn other big words like epistemological and axiological and all these philosophy words, because rhetoric does climb into bed with philosophy to a large degree. True rhetorician like myself would say that, yeah, philosophers are highly rhetorical in the way they present their truth. So, and perhaps that's the defining nature of rhetoric, is we find it everywhere, even in places where, you know, in the sciences and in engineering, there really shouldn't be a whole lot of persuading going on. Let's just find the truth and show it to everybody. Problem is, truth needs a little help. It's not always persuasive on the face of it. So this class, vocabulary exams, we'll have discussions, I think, for, I want to do 2 weeks of discussions, and then we'll have a short paper due the third week, and we'll do that for about 12 to 14, 15 weeks, and then we'll have that final exam, which will be over even more vocabulary to really, because I know if you've got the words to talk about something, then you understand the concepts, and you can manipulate those concepts in your mind, and you can think about them very intelligently. But if you're always just talking about things and stuff and that junk, you know, how do you know anything if you don't have the vocabulary? That's what makes Greek such a great language for philosophy and rhetoric, is you can build new words in Greek. German is the same way, and German has been a great language for philosophy, and that's why most of the modern well-known philosophers were German, or at least spoke German. And I think a serious philosopher needs to speak or be very familiar with Greek, Latin, and German to read the works of the greatest philosophers of all time. Okay, so here we are in rhetorical theory. There's a dark side to rhetoric I need to tell you about. Here's a new word for you, your first word. Memorize this one. Write it down. Sophism. Sophistry. Comes from the Greek word sophos, which means wisdom. Sounds good, right? But sophism and sophistry, the use of that word has been altered for about 2,500 years, and it literally refers to people doing some persuasion that are disingenuous, who persuade you to believe that this course of action is the best, when actually another course of action is probably best, and they know it. And so they use these tactics. Well, I suppose some fool themselves. They use these tactics of sophism to get you to do what they want. It's you know, the art of manipulation, if you will. And so, you know, you'll hear and read things like, you know, what sort of sophistry is this, sir? In these 1800 manuscripts. Kind of fun to read about. But this is back in a time where the educated English-speaking world was educated in Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and Yale, and they studied rhetoric as one of the main courses of study in their education. Read Thomas Jefferson after you take this class, and I think you'll read him in a whole new light. Okay, so sophistry, the disingenuous persuasion. Plato called it making the worse appear the better reason, making the weaker argument appear to be stronger when it's not. It is an argument. There's a case there, but it's a weak one. And I have my favorite toy here, the scales of justice, the scales of balance. And as you learn rhetoric, what you're doing is you're considering what you hear, what you see, and the weight going into one scale or the other, and the scale tipping one way or the other. And there's always reasons on both sides of that scale It's never just one-sided. And it tips one way or the other, but sometimes only slightly. And that introduces the element of probability into argumentation. And far too many scientists don't want to admit to probabilities in their science. Mathematicians will. Mathematicians understand probability very well. But what it is, it's likely that if you invest your hard-earned money in XYZ stock that you'll make a 50% profit in 6 months. Well, you listen to a sales pitch, they'll give you all sorts of reasons why you need to do that, and you will make 50%. Or it's going to the moon. But when you start examining those reasons on the scales, and they give you reasons why it's going to tip this way for sure, but then in reality it goes the other way and you lose all your money. Sophists have been at work, people who may have given you some sensible reasons. Nobody's persuaded by nonsense, but the reasons turned out to be wrong, and caution would have been advised in the case. So, all right, so in this class we have a couple of exams, midterm and a final. We have discussion forums. I want to see sensible, thoughtful posts on these discussion forums, and you will get full credit. Even if your depth of thought, I'm not going to evaluate your depth of thought, I just want to see you thinking and moving forward with understanding the discipline here, whether you're taking this as an undergraduate or in graduate school. And in our essays, I want to see you really grappling and able to write about, use the vocabulary of the discipline to explain to us what you're learning. Okay, this is a picture of Aristotle here, by the way, and the first, not the first person to teach rhetoric, but he did it the best, and he wrote a book called On Rhetoric. You'll be reading some of this book throughout the semester. We'll keep returning to it. And Aristotle gave us a good definition for rhetoric. I'll throw it on the table here. Rhetoric is the art of discovering in any situation the available means of persuasion. He didn't say rhetoric is persuasion. He didn't say rhetoric is the art of persuading people. He's saying it's the art of discovering the means of persuasion, of figuring out what it takes for this group of people who are looking at an election coming up for elected officials. What does it take to persuade them to vote this way or that way? The situation also includes their background, what's going on, in this case politically at the time, and what's going on in the world, who's the best politician to lead us into the future. And rhetoric is that art that helps us to know how to approach this situation and give the best presentation possible. No guarantees of persuasion. That's Aristotle's version of it, and I want you to be able to explain that to me in our first assignment, actually. But we're looking up some other definitions also by some very brilliant minds over the centuries, and they'll have many interesting things to add to this definition. Rhetoric's really hard to pin down to the definition. I'll talk about that more in our next lecture. For now, our online class, I'm building this class as we go. I haven't taught it in about 7 years, and I'm ready to redo things. You know, teachers keep learning too. And so rather than trying to figure it all out in 2 days before the semester starts, I've had a really busy summer. We'll be building the class as we go, and I'll do my best to stay ahead of you so that if I hadn't told you that, you wouldn't know other than the stuff's not there right now. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next lecture.